computer, yes. There it is, okay. Hello everybody, welcome to EDSC 5000, week number 4. And let me share my screen. Welcome to everybody, and hope everybody got the email. So let's get into the course. Let's see down here. Whoops, that's not it. Back here, and share screen. And there we go. Okay. So the topic of tonight is, we've got 3 main topics that are all related. And first one is, we're going to build our school roadmap and think a little bit about classroom climate. The second thing we're going to do is build the idea of a psychology of success. And the third thing we're going to do is think about our classroom motivation strategies and our goals for classroom management. So our agenda. And so is everybody, if anybody's not seeing this, then let me know, but I think we're good with technology. So what I included this week is the longer, there's more content in this PowerPoint than there is in the regular PowerPoint. So if you want to, I'm going to go through each slide, but you've also got it on Canvas, and there's a lot more words. So we're not really going to address all the words on each of these slides. But if you want to stop the Zoom and read the words, then you've got them. And so there's a lot of connective tissue. So as we start thinking about both the kind of schools we're walking into, as well as some of the assignments that we're doing for the class, then one of the things that I want you guys to think about is the idea that what is going on at that school. And it's hard to define that exactly, but so we're going to use a roadmap picture to define that. And so one of the assignments is to do a climate analysis. So one of your fieldwork assignments. So in the live class, we're able to do a lot of things where we're discussing things, and they did a little bit of a climate analysis, but I think you guys have the same materials, but basically that's going to be something that you need to do on your own. So starting out, just as a general idea, again, whoops, we've got a mouse here to kind of as our pointer, so watching the mouse. So if I thought about schools in terms of, I don't want to highlight it, just okay. So I'll just talk about the mouse. So I've got this area of dysfunction on my roadmap, and if I move up higher, I've got this area of function, and so that's my north-south. And I've got on one side, I've got practices that are mostly driven by trying to control, and one side that's practices that are mostly trying to empower. And so we could put any of these footprints or kind of schools along the pathway, and there's a general pathway. So the interesting thing is that we've been collecting data now for about 17 years about where schools are, and we can pretty much predict pretty well. So here's some slides that help you with some words, but I'm going to use my own words here, and we're going to kind of walk through. So the starting point is that you've got this, let me just share, stop share. So you've got a climate inventory in front of you that you've got access to. So it's scales 5 and 6 from the school climate inventory. So we're just talking about these 2 scales today. So so there's a lot of different areas to what happens in a school. There's the appearance makes a difference. Well, you know, we see schools where they get a new building and the achievement goes up because kids perceive the school differently, and they feel like it's, you know, they're at a better place, and so they should act better, and they should be more motivated, and they should respect the school more. Faculty relations is important, but it's not something we're going to focus on. Student interactions is really important, but you're going to focus on that in another course. Again, leadership is really important, but we're not going to focus on that in this class. But in this class, we do focus on the idea of we've got a management discipline environment, and we've got a learning assessment practices. So if you look at the inventory, you've got five levels of 3 phenomena. So there's a high phenomenon, a middle phenomenon, and a low phenomenon. So the way this inventory is structured is that it's talking not just about how people feel. So we're not saying do you agree or disagree necessarily with a statement like, do students, feel safe at your school? And we have a question like that, but it's not agree or disagree. It's a question that which of these phenomena is more the case. And so I'll stop this share and share what you guys have. So you guys have this inventory, scales 5 and 6. So your job, you can do it right now by downloading that off Canvas, or from the field work, or from Canvas. I can show you where it is on Canvas too. But so finding the school climate inventory, and so your job is going to be to assess your school. So if I'm looking at this school and saying, well, from my perception, and again, most of the time we have both the teachers and the students. Am I sharing that? Share screen. Oops, I'm not sharing. Am I sharing it now? Okay, there we go. I wasn't sharing it before. I'm sorry. So you've got, again, scales 5 and 6. And so these are scales that you can find on Canvas. And it's not your assignment for this week, but it's kind of something that we want to incorporate into our idea for this first part of the class. So it's going to give us a good sense of kind of where your school is in a roadmap. So for some of us, we have a school that we're working at. For some of us, we have a school that we know pretty well, but we're going to pick one school and we're going to think about at that school generally, given our perception. So we're not asking whether we don't really have data from students or from teachers. You're going to have that maybe sometime later in your program. I think in your last section you need to do that. But for now, it's just our perception. So all we have to do is bring this into a room, bring it into a school, or take our experience from a school, look over these items and say, so would I say the school-wide discipline policy is consistent? Would I say it's used by some people, or would I say it's in writing only? And then I would give my school a score. And so I would do that for all the items. And so and we'll talk about what those scores mean. But this might be, if you're doing the Zoom and you want to get this out of the way, this might be a good time for stop the Zoom, pause it, find that, and then do that activity. So for those of us who are online, we might take a second, and unfortunately, taking time is going to be a lag in the Zoom. So if you have that, then that's great. If not, then you might just kind of look over this and say, so as I look over these statements, where does my school fall generally? More in the high phenomenon level, most schools fall in the middle phenomenon level, or are there some of them in the low phenomenon level? And as you'll see, all of them imply things people choose to do every day. They're not things that involve kind of default conditions at a school. So again, you've got that. Sorry, I keep going. I guess we have to do that about every 20 minutes because the lights keep going off. Okay, so stop share and we'll go back to our PowerPoint. Oops, that's not it. Okay, so so your job is to rate these schools and rate one school. So what's interesting as we start thinking about rating these schools is that that you think that things would be all over the place in terms of, it just all depends, everything depends. It could have a great leadership, but really poor this. It could have great environment, but poor this. The teachers could get along, but the, instruction is terrible. But what happens is, it's kind of interesting that the phenomenon tends to be one phenomenon or another. So what's interesting is that it's a low phenomenon. There tends to be a lot of ways to be unsuccessful, but it tends to be that people do whatever, that there's that they're kind of in a reactive mode, that the best way to describe instruction is we're domesticating things. So, I mean, we're just trying to keep the lid on, keep control, compliance is our goal. And when we think about faculty, one of the things that surprises a lot of us when we get into this profession is that faculty are really competitive with each other. We be competitive when we're in the business of helping human beings learn. Why would there be a competitive environment? That's, for some reason, there is. And then when you guys think about the posters that, if we thought about classifying practices into success versus failure psychology, and you've got this in the book in chapter 7 on success psychology. When we look at those failure psychology practices, we see a lot of those failure psychology practices done in schools. So as we look at those practices, then we'll reflect a little bit more. When we go to that school that's really high functioning, when we're giving lots of 5s and 4s on the survey, we see that we have a lot of intention, and that intention comes primarily from leadership that has a clear picture of what they want, and so the school starts creating a picture of what good is. So all these things like, we really know what good instruction looks like. We know what we're trying to accomplish with students. And ultimately, there's systems and principles in place that guide us. So the phenomenon experience for the students is ultimately we keep asking ourselves more of those questions of liberating questions, like how can we get more potential for students? How can we get more of this from students? Really different questions than we're asking ourselves in a domesticated world. And teachers end up finding more ways to be collaborative. So it's interesting that all these things tend to go together in the same school. And when we're in one of those schools, we feel pretty lucky. When we're in one of these, oops, that's not it. These low function schools, it's a tough place to work, but somebody's got to work there, and we can make a real difference working in those schools, but I hope we can improve them too. But most schools are in between. Most schools are in this middle range. And again, most things kind of fall together. So we're somewhat intentional. I was just working at a school on Friday, and they consider themselves a really good school, but they just have so many areas where they thought they were intentional, but they really haven't thought through things like student voice or empowerment or how they thought about consistency or vision. So adults working hard all day in a place where they saw is very functional, but it was really definitely a 2-level school. And so the key is we're doing what works all day long, and that's different for everybody, and it's not very coherent. And we're focused a lot on programs, and we're kind of just perpetuating the same qualities over and over again. In fact, we are congenial with each other, but they're not collaborative. And it's an interesting distinction. You'll find that we're friends, but we don't talk about instruction, or we don't talk about what we believe, because it would just end up kind of hurting the friendships. And then when you look at your success psychology idea, then you're getting kind of a mixture of success promoting and failure promoting. So again, you might, as you look at your school, as you're rating the school, you might see, is it a lot of that high level phenomenon, middle level phenomenon, or low level phenomenon practice going on? And we'll keep moving along as we build this roadmap. Okay, so since we're online, you guys, we don't have the chance to do a really cool activity that we just did. But you can think about it yourself. You've got chapter 7, but what I would encourage you guys to do is just think about classifying practices for yourself, watching the classroom and saying to yourself, do I see practices that are promoting or undermining these qualities. And I know there are a lot of qualities we're trying to create in schools, but what I'd say is these three to me stand out because there's so much that they're at the center of so much that we're trying to accomplish. So again, you've got a lot of this spelled out in the reading, but let's just kind of go through this. So if I hope that you guys kind of have a handle on these terms. They're not terms that we can use substitutes for these terms, but they're probably pretty good terms to use. So starting with an internal versus external locus of control. So let's think about what that means. So if I've got an internal locus of control, then I see myself as the author of my own fate. I see that I make choices and there are effects from those choices. I have thoughts and they translate into things I do. My actions translate into effects in the world that I have to be accountable to. So I see myself as my thoughts, actions, and choices are leading to effects, and I have to live with those effects. And so I have to either change my thoughts and actions to get different effects or live with those effects. If I've got an external locus of control, well, and let's just add something. So an internal locus of control is more predictive, and again, it says that in the book, but it's true. It's more predictive than anything else. So we spend a lot of time talking about social, emotional, or socioeconomic status, but when we think about what is the most predictive thing for student success, it's not income, and it's not ethnicity. It's do students, and we can see this. We can see students of any group who've got an internal locus of control, and we could say that kid is going to do pretty well. And when we have longitudinal research about how students do who have an internal locus of control, we see that later on in their life, especially if we take the students we've got today and we take them 10 years later, the research will say that health, wealth, mental health, lifestyle choices, all sorts of things are going to be vastly different for the student who today has an internal locus of control. And we can go one step further. We can say that what we do is creating that. So if I create an internal locus of control in my students, in my class, then I'm basically creating success for those students later in their life. Versus if I do certain things in my classroom, I'm actually creating an external locus of control. So as we think about what those things are, it's really important to say, even if they're convenient, even if they make sense to us, even if other teachers have done them, let's not do those things. So you guys might all just kind of think to yourself, you've got a friend or you've got a person that you know, they could be 5 years old or 95 years old, and they could still have an external locus of control. It really doesn't make any difference. And the same with internal locus of control. Like, let's listen to the language that they use to describe their reality. So what is it? And if anybody who's online wants to chime in, that's great. But I might answer for you if you guys don't want to. But so like, hey, you just did this. Why did that happen? Like, well, there's nothing you could do, or it wasn't my fault, or like, why are you always picking on me? Or like, stuff happens. So when a person's got that mentality, it doesn't make them a bad person, but we know that if they keep that mentality throughout their life and throughout our class, the future is going to be a struggle for them, no matter what. They could be a billionaire's son, and if they've got that mentality, they're going to be an unhappy person, no matter what their life circumstances are. And so we can ask ourselves, our job is to make them better. And so what teaching practices could we use to create more of an internal locus of control versus an external locus of control. And again, you've got lots of ideas from the book on that subject, but it's worth you thinking about it yourself and saying, you know, what happens in a classroom where I look at that classroom and I see the teacher doing things, and I see the kids getting less and less responsible, or more dependent, or more external, or more addicted to something, and versus that classroom where I see more empowerment and more kids being able to be self-reliant. And so what do we do to create those two different worlds? And plenty of teachers doing both those things. So it's not like we're all trying our best to create an internal locus of control. We're actually doing a lot of that, creating external locus of control. Okay, so the second variable is the idea of belonging and acceptance. And it's really easy for us to just feel this one, just to be in this one. So I'm walking into a room of other people, and situation A, everybody knows me and they appreciate me. And I feel like they accept who I am, and they know me, and they know kind of how I work, and they're okay with it, and maybe they like it. So what are all the benefits of that experience, feeling accepted and like I'm part of things? And we could start adding them up, and a lot of them are things like academically, I'm more relaxed, I'm more creative, I use my humor, I take more risks, my thoughts are clearer, I have less stress, I have less cortisol. All sorts of things are going to happen to me because I have this feeling that I'm okay and I'm connected. And so much of my personality is going to come out in a natural way when I'm in that environment. So let's take the opposite, where I feel like I'm not part of things. I'm on my own. People don't get me. Maybe I'm a stranger to them. And we could say, what happens in that case? And we probably know that we don't take risks. We don't bring our personality out so much. We're a little different. We're trying harder. There's more cortisol in our system because we're trying to survive. So throughout the day, we're building up more stress, and life's more of a struggle. And ultimately, it's beating us up and making us feel like we're disconnected and not okay, and so probably just generally less happy. So we can do things, again, as teachers, to promote a sense of belonging and acceptance in our class, or we can do things that promote that sense of competitiveness and comparison and worthlessness and alienation. And you say, well, why would you do that? Well, think about all the practical things. All it takes is for me to create a lot of comparisons and competitiveness in a class, and I can kill the belonging and acceptance. So we're not doing them because we're mean. We're doing them because we thought it was clever. And so, let's think through all the things that we've seen and create and think about those classes where the teachers were doing things that got those qualities. And if we go into the research, just put into the research, put into a Google Scholar search, belonging and acceptance and student achievement, and you'll get this long list of studies that show the relationship between student achievement and belonging and acceptance. So even if we just want student achievement, then it's worth getting belonging and acceptance. And it's even more important to get the internal locus of control. The last one is the growth orientation versus fixed ability orientation. And so we have 10 good years of time with that book, the growth orientation book, but even before that, Carol Dweck probably spent 20 years doing research studies on students who had a growth orientation versus fixed ability orientation, and the effects on all sorts of things. Health, achievement were dramatically different. So students who have a growth orientation are going to approach work and long-term outperform students who don't have a more fixed ability orientation. So let's think about what that means. So a growth orientation is very simple to explain, and it's really antithetical to our ego. So a growth orientation is the more I try, the better I get. Really, really simple. But our minds make things complicated. So as opposed to going into things going, gosh, I'm not very good at that, or I'm okay at that. If I tried more, I'd be better at that. Very, very simple, ego-free conclusion, easy logic in that. Cause and effect. I try, I get better. But what our mind does is it creates this more complicated phenomenon, which is defense of our ego. So we can create that growth orientation by what we do, by encouraging that. But if we don't encourage anything, the default is going to be a lot of fixed ability orientation. So what's a fixed ability orientation? I better not make a mistake, because then if I do, I'm going to feel bad about myself, and I don't want to feel bad about myself. So I'm just going to keep doing things that are easy for me. And if I go into a situation where I'm supposed to be good and I do bad, that's unacceptable. So that would be tragic, and I sure don't want that to happen. So I'll be stressed about failing in that situation, and I'm going to make sure I don't ever do those things that I don't perceive myself as being good at. And you can just see the confinement of the thinking and ultimately the action, because I stopped trying at anything, and I start quitting really fast. And so when we're in that math classroom and we're watching the student and they're in the lesson and then they get confused, and then a minute later they just go, whoa, and then their head goes down. How did that happen? Did they get tired all of a sudden? What? They were active in the lesson, and then all of a sudden they became an inactive person in the lesson, and they didn't get tired, they didn't become stupid, but they did make a conclusion in their mind. I'm with it, I can do this, I can do this, I can do this. Maybe I can't, so I better just check out and just protect myself and quit. So we're the teacher in that room. How do you create students staying with it, trying to persist through mistakes, not worry about making mistakes, think I'm just getting better no matter what happens? How can I keep that mentality rather than that mentality of you better not make a mistake or else you're going to feel bad, feel stupid? So those qualities are at the heart of what we call a psychology of success. And every action, every teacher action is going to create more or less of those qualities. So those are at the heart of the questions in the survey and in the school climate assessment inventory that you're using. So the more that it's a 5 level is going to be this side, and the more the 1 level is going to be defined by this lower side. So as you assess that classroom, you can see how much of the success psychology thinking is in your ratings of that world, and the correlation between using those practices, the achievement at that school is almost perfect. So it's almost a perfect predictor of the achievement at that school, how much they're doing this or how much they're doing this. So I guess I'd say we could go to 100 schools, and in 100 schools, that would be true. There isn't a variation to a school that does the failure psychology stuff and gets great results, and there isn't a variation where we do the success psychology stuff and we don't ultimately long term. We can take students who aren't very academically able today, but if we do this stuff every single day, they're going to be academically able eventually within some amount of time. So you've got in the book, you've got good descriptions for these. So we're going to build this roadmap, which is your first discussion item for the week. So again, you've got words here. So we're at the base of the roadmap is our teacher style matrix, and we could use that. We could do a school-wide orientation, and I'll show you that in a second, or we could do it here. So remember that we've got, again, high function up here, low function down here, and more fear control based over here, more trust and empowerment based over here. And so we can look at this as kind of a roadmap for success. So we'll map the rest of our features onto here. Again, some words that if you want to stop the video at any point and read these words, you've got them in the Canvas PowerPoint presentation. So if you want to look at it that way, that's fine too. Again, this was created so people who didn't have the explanation, the verbal explanation, could read all the kind of the threading language. But we're just going to flip through these since you've got me explaining things to you. So here's what it looks like at a school level, and we'll call it paradigms as opposed to styles. So you've got whole schools, and probably our scores are gonna land here. We'll show you how the scores land. But I've got whole schools that think like this, you know, a whole one paradigm school, empowering school. We've got most schools down here in the two paradigm, and then some schools that are not very high functioning down here. So the thing that makes us come up, whether it's a classroom or a school, I'm intentional and I'm thinking about coherent practices, and that's a tough one for us at our level of practice, because most of us are just trying to get to the day. But as we build through our career, as we progress in our career, we got to start asking ourselves, are the things I do they all get me where I want to go, or are there some of the things that are getting me there and other things that are kind of holding me back? And when we think about a word like capacity, that sounds really abstract, but some of those things are just like, you know, I need the students to do more of the passing out papers. I need to put the desks in a way that helps me teach the way I want, or I need to have the students do this, or I need to have student leaders, or those. There's a lot of capacity things that we can just say, you know, it's not really about me and my effort and my heart, because that puts a lot of pressure on us to make it all about being awesome. We don't want to be awesome. We want to create a world that makes it easier for everybody to succeed. So I would call that area capacity. And then as we think about moving over, can I think about building more trust, more connection, and empowerment? And those look a lot like the words from our psychology of success area, and that's not by accident. So if we put the two things together, we kind of find that when we put our correlation, climate by achievement, did we already talk about that? We didn't talk about that very much. So if we measure climate by achievement, what we get is almost a perfect correlation. That's an earlier slide, but that we did talk about. Yeah, so if I'm rating things mostly high, probably I'm going to get achievement that's at that 90th percentile level. If I'm rating things down here at the low level, I'm getting that achievement that's down to the 20 or 10% level. So what's interesting, and there's a very small dots, but they're almost a perfect correlation. So those of you who understand correlation, 0.7 correlation is almost a perfect correlation. So we have data from about 500 schools now, and the correlation between the school climate inventory and the achievement at the school is almost always perfect. And now we don't have these easy numbers anymore, but we still have something like percentiles. So one of the things I'd say is, just for us to keep in mind, is that the school down here is doing different things than the school here. But the other thing is, they're trying to do different things. What they're trying to do is different. And on some level, we say, well, what about the kids at the school? Granted, that's true, but it still doesn't mean it still doesn't make it any less true that they're trying to do different things than these students. So it's not so much of a value judgment as it is a judgment of just phenomenon. We're classifying phenomenon. So if we place that correlation onto our roadmap, what we get is kind of an interesting line, an interesting map of this phenomenon. So again, climate and achievement, climate and achievement, climate and achievement, climate and achievement, they're always correlated, but they don't go straight up and down. They go in this pattern. They move up toward this two paradigm before they go to the better paradigm, to the higher scoring paradigm. So let's go to the next slide where we put everything together. So if we put all these pieces together and we put some words in there, what we get is kind of an interesting map. And so the first place I'd have you guys stop, and it's our discussion, it's a global discussion, so you're not discussing with your group. It's another 3-point discussion for everybody. So you might stop the video and just look at the scores that you gave to your school or the school you know. Think about where you rated it, and then look at the phenomenon and say, so if I gave middle ratings, my school probably is in this phenomenon here, this 2-style phenomenon. And if I gave high ratings, it's probably moving more this more trusting, empowering phenomenon. And if I gave really low ratings, it's a lot of either teacher-centered authoritarianness or people just kind of doing whatever, and it's kind of in this more dysfunctional place. So again, more function, more control-based, higher function, more trusting and empowering based. So one of the questions for you would be, as you look at this phenomenon, then do you find that your ratings fit onto the roadmap? And they may not, but my experience is about 95% of the time, maybe 19 out of 20 schools, it fits pretty well onto the roadmap. Some of the questions you guys might ask yourselves, and this is not a school improvement class, so we're not going to spend a lot of time here, but you are walking into a phenomenon, and that's the reason we would do this. You're walking into a school, and understanding where that school is in some context is part of what we want to prepare you for. But if I'm thinking about school change, I might ask myself, how come there's no amount of doing this stuff, there's no amount of doing this middle level stuff that's going to get me to these high level results? I'm not going to create excellence of community by creating this external teacher-centered world. And no matter how well I do it, no matter how many PDs we have about it, and I guess I'd say if we went back in history in Los Angeles, we'd see schools trying to do this over and over and over again, working, and not their achievement not budging 1 inch, not in their school climate scores not budging 1 inch. So how come we can try so hard but not budge an inch? And the answer is because no matter how well we do this, we're not going to get improvement until we move this direction into that world of asking ourselves the questions: how do we create more empowerment? How do we create more connection? How do we create more trust? And that's and it seems to be an inviolable law of school improvement. So that's a place for you to stop the video and maybe reflect on. You've got a discussion item, but you also have a fieldwork question related to assessing school climate. So you might reflect on both those assignments at that point. And you've got 2 slides here that are more terms or more thoughts. This is not in the book in any place, so this is probably the best place to get this information. It's also, if you want it, if you just Google Transformative Leader Roadmap, you can go to chapter 5 and read about this. If this is really an interest of you, I'm guessing that might be 1 or 2 of you, but probably most of you guys are not interested in following this up that far. Okay. So as we reflect on this idea, it's helpful because you're going to hear people describing your school. You walk into your school and you're going to hear people describing what's possible in some context. And what we're hoping is that this is giving you a context that can maybe be a little bit more valid context than what they're using. So when that person basically says, you say, you know, I want to create a class where there's increased self-direction over time and we use a lot of inquiry or projects. And people say, well, that won't work with the students at this school. We got to be able to hear that somehow and understand, what are we hearing? And what I'd say we're hearing is, what they're saying is, we got to do low-level stuff with these students. And when we think about what that means or the implications of that, we could go back up here and say, okay, so what they're saying is, we got to do this stuff with our students. And that, you know, that's a great place for you guys to just reflect with yourself right now. Ultimately, we're not gonna discuss this, but you might just check in and say, so when you hear people say you got to do this, what would you say to that person, or what are you thinking when they say that? And I'll keep saying to you guys, I'm not recommending at all that people call people out at schools, because it just doesn't end up well for anybody. When we basically call people out for doing something that sounds kind of negative in our minds, then you end up being the target, and you get criticized for being critical. So this is something that's going on inside our head. But when we hear someone say we should do more of this, one of the things I might think to myself is that I'm looking at this roadmap saying, if I keep doing this, I'm going to keep getting these results. So if I'm happy with these results, yeah, let's keep doing this. If I'm happy with limiting my kids' futures, then let's keep doing this. And even if we're not successful at doing this, trying to do it is going to pull us this direction. If we desire it, it's going to pull us this direction. If we're resigned to doing this all day long, we're stuck. So we're not coming into a school as a leader. We're not coming into school as a change agent that can make a change tomorrow. But we are coming into a school with the awareness of what's what. And so I hope that you guys have a sense of how this roadmap plays out in schools. So if we were in here, I would really encourage you guys to do this, but we don't have time. But classifying teacher practices by the success psychology dimensions is really useful. And again, we're not going to be able to do that, so that's not one of our areas. So, but we do want to start looking at the area of motivation and what we're going to put into our classroom management plan D, and also just how we're going to approach classroom management or classroom motivation in general. So this might be a place where you could just kind of envision some of those classrooms where you thought things were really effective. And if we don't ask what's our heart's content, then we're always going to ask the pragmatic question, like, what's possible? And when we ask what's possible, we usually end up in a pretty low level place because we think about all the limitations. But we can go back to the roadmap, and let's just go back there for a second. And let me tell you just a story of a school. So there was, by the way, there are a lot of stories of schools that are in neighborhoods that are low income. There's a principal who's in the building that I'm in now that they kept working at this. It didn't really work that well, but ultimately they got to the point where they were a 4+ school in a really poor, disadvantaged neighborhood. There was an at-risk school or a continuation school. So all the kids were kicked out of. There's a school next door that was basically doing this 700 stuff, the 700, 3.5. that 2-level stuff. So they were doing that, and they kicked all these kids out into this continuation school to get rid of them. And they stayed there because they were just doing that stuff. Their values were 2, their practices were 2, their outcomes were 2. But at the school where all the kids got kicked out, the teachers decided, we're going to create this. So the teachers created this world, and the climate at that school was more like 4, and the achievement was right around here. So the achievement at the school the kids were kicked out of was higher than the place they got kicked out of. So because they just chose to do this, and the teachers were committed to it. And that's really a big point, is that it wasn't really so much about some special skill set. It was just about commitment, that they just decided, we're going to have a school that's about creating empowered kids. We're going to ask them, what do they want to do? Set their own goals. And what do you want to do? Like, how do you want to have a better future? Like, let's design your curriculum. Let's have you, and I don't know the specifics so much, but I know that was their commitment, to create that self-directed world. And when we measured their climate, it was really high. And when we measured the achievement, they were higher than the school that the kids got kicked out of. So to me, that's telling. And so as we go back to motivation, let's think about, what are we committed to? Not so much, who are our students and what are they used to? I'm not sure that's a very empowering question. And it's and I don't know where it gets us to say, what are our students used to? Because we're all used to something that's worse than what we could be doing, every single one of us on the planet. So let's think about some motivational strategies and how we think about those. So one of the ways to think about it, sorry about the small type, but you've got these charts in the book, so you can just be looking at them in the book. But motivation is not simple, but what I'm trying to do here is create some simple ways to think about the differences. But ultimately, if you think about every motivation, that's all the motivations inside of us, there are 1,000 things going on at one time. So we really aren't talking about any, we're not saying, oh, there's one thing happening to me in my internal processing. It's not. There's 1,000 things that are going on. There's infinite amounts of history and phenomenon and visual. And there's so many things that you're picking up. So to say that there's one thing happening, like I'm working for a grade, that's not really true. I mean, it might be a part of it. In fact, a big part of it. But so if we look at a great big distinction, we could talk about the distinction between an extrinsic world, an extrinsic world versus an intrinsic world. And I'm not sure why that's what it is. So the assumption in an extrinsic world is that we need to give someone something outside of them so they'll feel like what they did was worth it. And ultimately, for us, we would want them to repeat the behavior because that's what we want. So we choose desirable behavior, and then we try to get people to do more of that behavior by giving them something outside. So the intrinsic idea is that there are things that are satisfying in and of themselves that we would want people to recognize the satisfaction of the doing of those things and not need something outside of themselves. So that's the broad idea of the two areas, and all these sub ideas are meaningful. So probably we're focused more on the outcome with an extrinsic. They did what we wanted. Probably on the intrinsic, something that happened along the way that was. So we're not talking about a technique or an event. We're talking about kind of a process. And we're saying that the learning task itself has value and meaning. And whether we help them recognize that or whether it's self-evident, it has inherent meaning. And when we give an extrinsic, what we're saying is that the learning task probably would only be done if we gave them something. And even if we say, well, let's take the idea, the extrinsic idea that if we give the student a reward for making their bed every day, they'll get in the habit of making their bed, and then that'll be a good thing. Then we can stop giving them rewards and they'll be in the habit of making the bed. But basically, if I'm rewarding you for making your bed, then what I'm saying is that you would never want to make your bed unless you got rewarded. So it's hard when I stop rewarding you for you to perceive it as it's good to make my bed. We could say the same thing about exercise or schoolwork. We could say that if I don't get rewarded, why would I do it? And if I'm there, then the question is, how did I get there? And was it because somebody gave me a logic that I would never want, that I should get rewarded to do it? And I would encourage all of you guys to look at the YouTube videos of the students who were either, and I probably could play those, but sorry you guys, I didn't think about that, but so I don't have them loaded up. But there are a whole bunch of YouTube videos where students are completing a task, and it's a puzzle or it's or something like that. And the students are either paid $20 to do it, or they do it for free. And the students who are paid to do it for $20 do it more slowly, do it with less quality, and at the end of the time, they perceive the activity as less rewarding. The students who do it for free do it faster, better quality, and when the time is up, they want to keep going rather than the students who are rewarded stop right away. Students who weren't paid continue with the task to try to complete it because they're intrinsically wanting to complete it and they perceive the task as better. So if you just watch those videos and think, wow, how can I justify, and you might be able to justify paying the student $20, the equivalent of that, whatever that is, our educational equivalent, to do something, because what we clearly see is the extrinsic does not promote quality in the effort. But if we go down here, we do have some thoughts to put into the equation, which is if a group of students does not have really anything like the behavior, skill set, or pattern that we want, we probably need to find some way to create a structure to help encourage them and see that picture. And one of the things I'd encourage is the next slide when we think about assessing behavior. So if I'm expecting people to show me intrinsic behavior that they don't have any experience with, then it may be difficult. So that's one of the reasons. So let's look real quick here at strategies again. These are in the book. So these are strategies that can be used as either intrinsic or extrinsic. So when you guys talk about positive reinforcement, then it means nothing to me when I read it in your classroom management plan, because it can mean anything. The difference between a teacher says, oh, I want to use positive reinforcement, which means I'm going to give a sticker when they do something, versus the teacher says, I want to use positive reinforcement, which means I want to help students find all the kind of powerful, positive things that they do and help them recognize those things. So the difference between a positive recognition and we're trying to help students recognize all their capacity is really different than trying to get students to be compliant by giving them things. And both of them are under the same title of positive reinforcement. So it means nothing to me. So when you get in your classroom management plan, please be specific about what you're trying to accomplish and be specific about what you think your techniques you're talking about are going to accomplish. The other one is, other two, assessing behavior we're going to spend a day going through this, and I hope that we are able to accomplish that online because it's complicated, but it's really worth it because I can, if you feel like your students just don't know how to act, assessing behavior is a great way to create clarity in that, and assessing quality of the quality picture of what you want and putting it into detail and having them think about it and having them self-assess how they do. That's a powerful thing to do. We can always also do it in a really extrinsic way or a not particularly effective way just by saying, oh, you know, you lost your points for this because you didn't do what I wanted you to do. So really, really different different outcomes and different things, both under the guise, under the heading of assessing behavior. And the other one that can be either really intrinsic or really extrinsic is competition. So we can be on a team where we feel like we're all working together on a team. And that can feel really like we're doing this together. We can also feel like we're compared, we're competing with each other for scarcity. Nobody's going to get enough. And in that sense, and if we lose, then we are losers or whatever, we've lost something. So there's a lot of ways to make that feel not great. And and also feel, you know, create a fear of failure. So those aren't things that we can say, oh, I do that and so it's good, right? Like, well, you can do it in a way that's really positive, and you can do that in a way that's you know, get you really different results that I would call not great. So your reflection question at this point, and it's the it's the second reflection question for the week is, and we're gonna add the piece about the intrinsic motivation strategies. But actually, we didn't really look at the extrinsic motivation strategies, did we? Well, let's go back to that. So our reflection piece is going to be these questions about how we see ourselves approaching this. And I'll tell you guys, we're just in a field right now where different schools of thought, different people in the field, different professional development is going to give you really different advice. So my job is to give you a little bit of context, but we really can't talk about the right way to do this, because I'll guarantee whatever I say, someone is going to tell you within a month that something that's really different from that. So if we think about some of the practicalities, think about how you would best want students to think about the grades in your class. And so when would you say grades feel like, if I don't get that grade, I'm a bad person, or at least I got this grade and that's, you know, that's why I did the work, or, you know, like all that extrinsic, the work wasn't the point was the grade. And you've been in those situations, and we've all gone through that. We've also probably had some experience, at least a little bit of experience, with the idea that a grade was more intrinsic. And how was that? And how did that come about? I guess we'd say because the grade was a reflection of what I wanted. So I really put in a lot of effort, and the grade reflected that effort. And so I thought the grade was a fair representation of my effort. I walk away feeling like I put in a lot of effort and did a good quality work, quality thing. And the grade said, yes, you did. So it's about me and my effort. It's not about the grade. The grade was like, yes, that's right. The grade said what I already knew, versus I better get a good grade. I better get a good grade. I better get a good grade. Yes, it was a good grade. Oh, now I'm relieved, or now I'm happy, or now I'm unhappy. So when the grade makes me happy or unhappy, then I know it's about extrinsic. When the grade is just, but if the grade's unfair, we've got a problem. So your question, one of your questions is, how are you going to create grade? How are you going to think about grades in a way that gets you the motivation that you want? So we've got these ideas of incentives and rewards and things like that. You've got to put those into your context in ways. Some of us might say, just there's really isn't a time when I always use them, and then you might say, well, for me, I use them a lot, especially if we're coming out of a applied behavioral analysis world. We're going to have to. There's a lot of thought about using stimulus response. Stimulus, the behavior we want. Response, positive reward, and a lot of people are going to encourage that. So you've got to think about how you're going to approach that thinking in your job. And I would put personal praise. Personal praise is essentially just is a drug. It's words that create emotions that create chemicals. So if we want to give a student a chemical of feel good, then we give them this praise. So how can praise be something that is less addictive? If I say, oh, I'm unhappy with you, I'm happy with you, I'm unhappy with you, I'm happy with you, then I'm trying to manipulate them with the drug. If I'm saying that basically I am happy with you all the time and you're just a great person and I just want to keep finding ways to tell you, I'm not manipulating the drug. I'm trying to activate just that feeling that they have that they're a good person. So am I trying to use a drug to manipulate someone? And in the egregious social context, we see that as keeping someone addicted to their drug so we can keep them as a slave. But keep them as we've got a lot of people on the streets who are addicted and to someone's advantage, and that's how they're manipulated by the drug. So if we don't want to do that in a minor sense, then we probably don't want to use it as an addictive way, but we can use it in the drug of being really positive to people and telling them how great they are. And that's a feel-good thing. There's no reason to give less of that to people, but it's about using it as a manipulative thing that is the thing that's a little less defensible. And again, we can use, when we start talking about the difference between punishments and consequences, it'll help us think about using the opposite. The reward punishment mentality, there is a punishment, and that involves pain. So we're using pain to modify behavior. And so we've got to create boundaries, but do you want to have that defined by pain, or do you want to have that defined by essentially people saying, it's just the word no, no, you can't do that? Or is it about trying to make people feel shame, bad, to modify behavior? And ultimately that involves sometimes getting external people involved, like parents. Do we want students to feel extra bad, not only from us, but also from other people in their life? Or do we want to think about parent phone calls as something, we can think about parent phone calls as useful, positive calls, information calls, strategic calls, but when we're trying to use them as third person delivery, pain delivery, then we got to ask ourselves if that's really defensible. So let's go back to our question of how we want to do this. And so this is the second question tonight for our Canvas. So this is the first part of our second question. So moving along to strategies that we would describe as intrinsic. If we think about the extrinsic strategies, it's actually easy to think about them as strategies, right? Because we can think of it as we do something, they did something, and we do something. So it's easy to think cause and or stimulus and response. The behavior occurred in our classroom, and then we had a strategy for that behavior. When we think about intrinsic motivation, we really don't have strategies as much as long-term intentions. So one of those long-term intentions, and we probably have more than this list, but one of those long-term intentions would be self-improvement as a goal. So I want my students to understand that they're improving. And one of the things I guess I would ask you to reflect on is, when you were 12 years old and you were sitting in class, did you have a good sense of how much you'd learned in the last month? And you're like, what? Let's just think about it. You're sitting there. What are you thinking about? And my guess is, if you were the average student, you're thinking about right now, you're looking around, kids next to me, I'm doing some work. I'm not thinking really about time and how much I've evolved over time. I'm thinking about now. I'd definitely say that's true about me. So for us to be effective with this, we can't count on students being aware of how much they've learned. So we have to help them think about, let's think about where we were and what we've learned. A student earlier was talking about just writing objectives on the wall. Like, let's look at, how did we do? Did we meet our objective today? Just those reflective questions, or how do we grow? Or let's think about things we couldn't do a month ago, and what can we do? Let's look at our papers. Let's look at our journals and see things we've done, or let's look at our notebooks and what are those ways that you could build in? It's not like if they're just a name and a bunch of grades in a grade book, all they see is, how's my grade doing? And that's not really, that's not progress. That's just me feeling like my self-rating. That's not really self-improvement. Self-improvement is about, how am I getting better? So I need to be thinking about, what have I done and what can I do now that I couldn't do before? And what can I do in the future if I invest? So that one takes some intention. So thinking about how I can create that. Another one is increasing responsibility. And so if I think about how I do that, it's pretty simple, you guys, actually. If I'm a teacher who walks in every day and goes, are people doing what I want? I'm not going to increase responsibility. I'm just not. But if I walk in every day and I say, how can I create this sense that we're going to get more responsible every day and we're going to grow that? And if I have that as an intention, I'm going to grow it, and I'm going to see a big difference. Every day I'm going to see a little difference, but over time I'm going to see a big difference. So what's my intention? It's been really clear, and it's got to be audible. First, it's a commitment. Second of all, it's audible. The audible part is, look, you guys, we were just able to do this, which shows that you guys can do this. It shows I can trust you to do this. It shows that which tells me that I can let you guys do this, which tells you that you guys can count on doing this in the future. And the converse, which is, I just trusted you guys with this really complicated stuff, and I saw a lot of people just messing around with it, which shows we're not quite ready for that. So we're going to take a couple weeks off and see if we're ready for it in the future. And so we keep having the conversation about how responsible we are. And so they're going to keep showing you that they're more responsible, and you're going to keep saying, yes, you are more responsible. Let's give more freedom. So what does more freedom look like? So as we build that thing with an individual student or for a class, at the end of the time period, we see that we get more and more and more of that quality growing. But again, if it's not an intention, it's just not going to happen. But we've seen classes where it just doesn't happen, when students regress and get less responsible, and it's tragic. So the other one, I hope as we start talking more about the instruction part of the class, that you guys are thinking about, how do you create, it could even be in terms of how we function, self-reflecting on, or the problem solving of our problems, class meetings and things like that are a chance to reflect, but building it into our work, building in more inquiry into our work, and more project-based learning and problem-based learning. So the last one is the idea of basic needs. And this is a question from the midterm So I'll just tell you guys right now. So the question on the midterm is, which of these is not a basic need? But why do we think about basic needs? There's such a great lens to think about everything that's happening in the class. If I look out at my class and I think, what basic needs are getting met right now and which ones aren't getting met, it's going to give me a lens into lots of great information. If I look out at my class and I say, are they doing what I want? Then I'm missing the key information, because if I look at things from the idea of basic needs, what I can say is, gosh, you know, I'm seeing all these students acting out. Why? Does it have anything to do with basic needs? Yeah, it's going to be because they're trying to get power back. They feel powerless. I see a bunch of students who are quitting on me. Yes, it has to do with confidence. I see a bunch of students who don't feel free, so they're again probably trying to get some way to, even if it's like checking their cell phone, just to feel some freedom. Love and belonging. I see students who are just trying to connect with each other in some way, even though it's not acceptable in what I've described as my expectations, but they just have that need. So can I get these needs met in a way where I've designed it into a class? And the answer is, if I try my best, I'm going to. Most of the time, some of the time. And then I'm going to have a class where I have so many fewer problems. I would say most of our problems in class come from students who are trying to get back power from a teacher who's taken away power from them or never gives them power. And so again, midterm question, and think about what happens when these things aren't in place. So again, that's a great lens for thinking about basic needs. Is a great lens for thinking about analyzing the problems in our class. And it's really an enlightening lens, because what we realize is that we've got to change, and as opposed to like they're just being immature. But it also helps us change. Hopefully helps us get solutions rather than like, that's being doing that. So some questions we have for building more intrinsic motivation. These are useful questions. I'll leave this up for a second. And I'll toggle back and forth between here, our next section, which is classroom management, section D, questions. Very simple directions for what you need to put in this section. But just think, for your classroom management plan, especially for the online class, we need to do a good job of this assignment. So at least a page of single space of you thinking through this area. So starting with a big picture, like what's your classroom management philosophy, your motivation philosophy, and then some of the things that you're going to try to do. So they may be strategies, but again, if they're more intrinsic motivation things, there are probably some discussions that are related to, like, how do I create need satisfying world? How do I create more success psychology? How do I create more intrinsic motivation? And simple things like creating more trust in their own ability and promoting more problem solving. So those are some of the things that if I ask myself those questions, all sorts of intrinsic motivation strategies come to my mind. So that is your job. Your group job is, again, you've got this PowerPoint if you want to look at those slides, or you can stop the video back and forth. So your job this week is to, one, let's think through this. The first one was locate any school on the roadmap. Two was make a comment on some motivational strategies that appeal to you. These are really simple, you guys. All they show is that we've thought through this a little bit. We're not really discussing them. The third one is a little more substantive. So again, it's more points and more substantive, and you're doing your small group. And it's writing a paragraph of your initial thinking about section D of your classroom management plan. So I'm not sure how to think about this, you guys. There's 4 of us are online, and I'm not sure how many people are watching the Zoom. So I don't know. I don't want to preach to the choir, but it seems like everybody who's watching the Zooms, definitely the people who are online right now, and the people who are watching the Zooms are doing a good job of their group involvement. But the people who aren't watching the Zooms and they aren't involved, aren't part of um, the group discussions, and they're not doing those assignments. And so I'm confused because I don't know how to do it. So you guys help me. I don't know how I can help them, and I don't know how you guys can help me help them or help them directly. I don't know what to do because I'm, like I said, let's just put it bluntly. I was just here with every single person who showed up to my in-person class. We all did the activities, and so I just know everybody's here, and we all did the stuff. And when I've got an online class where I've got people who seem to be just disconnected, I don't know what to do. So help me out um, if you run into those people somehow. Just say I don't. I mean, guys, I'm just kind of scrambling here. I'll send some more emails out. Please do the stuff. You can't have a point is you can't have a discussion topic when you are checked out and when you do it and nobody else does it and they go, oh, I forgot to do that. Like, no, the point was that everybody shares their thing and then reads everybody else's, and then they reflect, and the group feels like they both have their sense. They've got reflections from other people. They've got other people's sense. They've reflected on those people. And so you've created, so that's happened with a few groups. And it hasn't happened with some other groups. And I'm not sure what to do. So we've got groups of 4, and that's a important unit for you guys. You can tell me you want a different group, and we'll make some trades if you want. But right now, there's some people who kind of left hanging because the rest of the group hasn't done their job. So let me just say, no one's going to get penalized for other people, but for those people who are left leaving everyone hanging, I'm not sure what we can do for you other than just start dropping points and dropping, your expectation that you're going to be involved. But it's just strange to me why so I'm complaining about people who aren't online and aren't listening right now. So I'll kind of stop. Maybe I'll save the complaining for emails. So anyway, you guys, so if there's any questions, let's ask them right now. But those are 3 activities. I hope they're useful. But again, they're all just directly related to the work of the class. So one of them is going to be partly related to our field work assignments. One of them is related to our classroom management plan. And one of them is related to just also our classroom management plan. So they're both related to that task. And I pointed out the areas where you've got things related to the midterm. So any thoughts from the people online? Any questions before we sign off?
I have a question. So, can you hear me?
Yes. So, yeah.
Okay. So I'm just looking at the syllabus right now. I've been going mostly off of what's on Canvas and what's due each week. But I noticed for next week, an assignment that's due is CMP Workshop A and to do
Yeah.
a peer edit. Are
Yeah. So
we?
let me just answer that question quick. So don't worry about that. So you guys probably have already done that. So that's you can just check that off because that was an assignment that we did earlier.
Okay.
That's more for the other group. So but thanks for catching that.
Also, I think I'm in one of those groups where I feel like I'm responding. I know you extended some of the deadlines, so I've just been kind of keeping an eye to see if some of the people in my group are going to respond. But I was hoping if nobody responds this week, if I could just move to a different group.
Um,
And how do I do that?
yeah. I did not foresee this at all. But I'll send out another reminder, and if what I might do is just the people who are just not responding at all, I might just put them in their own group, and I might put the people who are responding into groups, just so you don't have to pay that price. But just know that there's no penalty for you if you respond and then you just hearing crickets in your group, then you're not penalized for what other people didn't do. But let's get you in a place where you actually get some meaningful interaction with other people.
Okay.
So thank you for that, because again, I just never imagined that it would be that complicated. So but there's another person who is kind of on her own, so maybe I'll put you in that group.
Okay, thank you.
So other questions? Okay, guys, so I guess we'll stop the share and we'll end the. Oh, that sounds like a child. Okay, so Paula, is that your daughter? Is that a question?
Oh my God, I'm so sorry. I unmuted that. That's my daughter.
That's okay. That's okay. It's a cute way to end the day. So if there aren't any other questions, then we're gonna sign off. If not, then that definitely email me, and so hope you guys have a good week, and the interactions are useful, and I hope that we get better participation in the discussions. So I'll talk to you guys later. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.